Welcome to SIG Cloud Provider for Wednesday, July 2nd, 2025. We are governed by the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, which basically boils down to treat each other with respect. Today we have a few issues or agenda items to talk about. Not even issues, just agenda items. We can take a, perhaps before we jump into agenda items, quick look. Should we see the needs triage open issues, just to see if we have anything, Elmika, that we haven't talked about yet? Oh, wow, nothing too new. We're going to have to go through at some point and jump through all of these 2022, 2023, and before issues. But it looks like we don't have any specific things that are new to discuss at the moment. Okay. Before we jump into our agenda, does anybody have any provider-specific things they need to bring up or that they want to update people about? I can speak for Azure and say that we don't have anything specific at this moment. Okay, so it looks like we have our first agenda item. I don't want to try to pronounce your GitHub handle, but please let us know how to, say your name if you're on the call and what we're talking about with this EFS CSI driver question.
Yeah, hello, my name is Maxim. I'm from storage team of Red Hat.
Wonderful, thanks.
I'm working on this feature for a year, and I had some Amazon engineers who reviewed that one of them was Kant, another is Dan Kovacevic, and none of them is responsive right now, and now it's complete silence. And I addressed all comments they provided on this PR. I am interested if anyone can help me with reviewing GTM approach with this stuff.
Okay, so I know that we've had Kirthan and others from Amazon on this call from time to time, and I have at least one idea of somebody to reach out to, but it looks like Almiko has ideas. What do you think, Almiko?
I had questions more than ideas. And I'm sorry I missed your name.
My name is Maxim.
Maxim, thank you. This sounds like something that is related to SIG storage. Did they direct you to come to SIG Cloud Provider, or like how could we help? Because normally we don't get into the storage parts of this, but I did notice up here you were mentioning AWS IAM permissions, and I'm wondering, is there something that we're responsible for that interacts with this?
It seems that this repo is listed in the list of the repos under this cloud provider group. So this is the only reason why I raised this issue here. And if you have any idea in any other place, yeah, I can move to another place asking if anyone can help with review. No, any special reasons to.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, if we're listed as the owners for this, then yeah, like we definitely should take some responsibility here. It's just rare for us to see, CSI specific stuff coming up. Is Kirthan here?
Yeah. Yeah, like as you're saying, like at least I don't usually look into this CSA because there's a separate team for the storage providers who looks at EBS, EFS, all the specific storage providers. That's why I didn't get a chance to look at this. I can try to ping some folks to see find them if who's currently working on these storage providers to ask them to take a look. But yeah, currently I don't have much context on the storage providers plugins, these repos, as I don't actually work on them.
Yeah. Thank you so much. If you can share any links, any person who can help with that. Yeah, highly appreciated. Thank you so much. And yeah, of
I
course,
did.
Hammond and Jansen Shafranik, they are in the context of this stuff. Yeah, we discuss it regularly, and currently the problem inside Red Hat that we don't have anyone from Amazon who can help us reviewing this.
Maxim, I have one idea, which is SIG Storage does have their regular SIG meeting every Thursday, and it looks like they have a SIG issue triage meeting on Wednesdays in maybe an hour from now. So it might be valuable for you to jump on one of those calls if possible, just to make sure you can at least rule out or discuss with some SIG storage people what they think.
Yeah, thank you so much. And can you share a link to this group?
Yeah, I put it in the chat of the meeting. I don't
Yes,
know if, do you see that?
yeah, I can see it. Thank you.
And if Elmiga wants to go to that link that I put in real quick, he can kind of show there's just a couple of yeah, there's a few things to note in there because they have a number of different meetings, but it looks like their regular SIG meeting is Thursdays, but they also have a SIG issue triage meeting, which would be today, I think in about an hour. So that is something to maybe consider. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. Great.
Okay, we are done with this stuff. Thank you.
Okay, great. Hopefully we can get you some answers. And thanks for putting these notes in, Almiko.
Yeah. I feel like there we might have a little bit of like I'm kind of wondering if there's a little confusion at the SIG level that we need to get to here. And yeah, Maxim, apologies. This has been sitting for so long.
We'll get to the bottom of it. We'll find you
Yeah.
the right people between Kirthan and SIG Storage and us. We'll find you somebody.
Yeah, I have a feeling that we've probably gotten some of the metadata around this like confused as well. So we might want to work with them about that. But yeah, we pinged the leads here for SIG storage and Hemant as well. So hopefully they'll have some comments too. And Kirthan's going to take a look.
Great. Great. Anything else on that? Okay. All right, next topic. Elmiko, you have some follow-up on your owner's files research.
Yeah, so I was a little hesitant to just start putting PRs on all the SIG Cloud Provider stuff before doing a little bit more kind of reading around because I just didn't want it to be seen as some just unwanted attention or whatever. But after looking around at like SIG Cluster Lifecycle, and I just looked at one that was like I think it was like SIG API machinery or SIG apps. Anyways, I saw other SIGs doing this as well. Or no, it was the SIG auto scaling, putting it into the VPA stuff. So I've seen other SIGs doing the same kind of thing where it seems like they put a leads alias in the maintainers section for the owners or the approvers. Just so that they could have like kind of the same thing we're doing. We can have a last line of defense if a change needs to go in and no one's around. So before the next meeting, I will start going around and making some PRs. I'll start with, I'll just do the Kubernetes and Kubernetes SIG stuff and just kind of do an audit there. And I'll try to make an issue in maybe the community or maybe one of our repos, like our cloud provider framework repo, just so that I can refer everything back to one point of information around like, links to where we discussed it in the meeting and then like kind of the rationale for why we're doing it and everything. But yeah, that's it. Just kind of giving one a little bit of update here. I've been trying to follow up on this.
Okay, great idea. And I feel like, summertime between KubeCons, this is the moment to do some of this clarification, cleanup, that sort of thing. So good idea. I'll look forward to those PRs. Of course, GitHub notifications being as delightful as they are, please do ping if you don't see anything. Much as everybody else is noticing, sometimes things can get lost. All right. And before I open a PR for charter updates, I figured the easiest place to start is to drop the current charter into a Google Doc. Um, uh, I shared, for editing to the SIG lead, tech lead, and tech leads and co-chairs, but I left it open for comment for anyone. So we've talked about, hey, the mission of this SIG has somewhat changed. We should probably change the charter, yada, yada, yada. And I think we're ready to move beyond. We should change it to let's walk through it and edit what we think, you know, is definitely missing or is definitely completely outdated. Um, and just a quick glance through it, I know that we've talked about making space in the SIG for new sub projects, that sort of thing, or changing some sub projects that we already are actually working. I think isn't there like the API something or other one that I think is already a sub project, but it isn't listed here properly. Anyway, so I think we have some work to do here, but this is not just your chairs and tech leads make all decisions. This is everyone can please give us some input. This Google Doc is just meant as a scratch pad until we're ready to put a pull request in, just because sometimes it's not easy to do a million edits on a pull request, even though we all have done that. But this is what it currently says. I actually, and I'll just one other comment, and then I would love to open it to other people's thoughts and questions, is I was a little surprised that we have as much continued relevance as we still do. Like this is 6 years old. I thought it would be much worse. So yeah, but I think there's definitely room for work. So yeah, API server network proxy, etc. Anyway, so yeah, interested in what people think, just kind of micro and also macro in terms of what does this SIG even do? Obviously, the glue work of finding the right places to talk to other SIGs is already sort of communicated in here. But yeah, if people say, oh, I didn't realize that this SIG did that, maybe that means because we're not doing it a lot lately, etc. Elmiko.
Yeah, no, I think that like the way we're kind of starting off here and you mentioning the API server network proxy and stuff is great. Like I think for me, like one of the tough parts about looking at the scope for SIG Cloud Provider, because when we started, I think it was much more clear cut. There was these cloud controller managers, and that was kind of like the scope of what we were looking at. But now we've grown, and we've grown to accept things like SIG storage has kind of an area of coverage around those specific topics. SIG networking has some cloud provider specific stuff there. But what I'm curious to capture and what I think might be difficult for us is like we've been talking about things like we started with the CCMs. Now we have things like API server network proxy, and now we're starting to talk about things like CRO, the Kubernetes resource orchestrator. And so I think I think it's really interesting for us to kind of dive into this whole where is the divide between Kubernetes, or is there a clear line between Kubernetes and the cloud provider? And then like how do we kind of bring these things together? And tying into that, I think that I just want to make mention of is Walter has this cool notion of kind of distributions of Kubernetes, and that even once we take Kubernetes and put like a CCM in it, or put a CSI driver in it or something, we've started to create a distribution of Kubernetes. And so I wonder if that is maybe something as well that we should try to start figuring out. Okay, how do we define the boundaries of what SIG Cloud Provider is responsible for and what we're investigating, and do that in a way that's clear to people, when they read this. And I think that's going to be challenging.
Yeah, I think, and that's a really good point. And there's also that difference between responsible for and integrating with, or responsible for and invested in. And I also think to your point about where, and even like as we were just showing with triaging that issue, where does SIG Cloud Provider interact with SIG Storage? I think it's more useful for us to define ways we work together as opposed to I always feel like if we try to define incredibly strict boundaries and write a rubric that perfectly will state where we do not do this thing, but SIG storage does. In some ways, that will end up being so specific that it will be almost impossible for people to use. So we have to kind of say, these are our areas, and this is where we overlap with or collaborate with these other areas. Does that make sense? That's kind of how I see it. Yeah. But there probably always will be some human judgment in there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I'm just taking a couple notes here because I think what you're talking about is really important. And hey, like I mentioned Walter and then he showed up. Like you know, this it's like I was just
Right.
talking about you, Walter, like a minute ago.
I'm sure this isn't indicative of anything, Michael.
Well, Walter magically showed up, and somehow I also just got signed out on this computer from the Google Doc where I was, writing things. So
Okay, that might be my fault.
it might be. But yeah, the discussion is basically I copied and pasted the existing charter, and we are talking about places that we want to improve or clarify it or name some of the things, um, like API server network proxy that were not defined as being in scope 6 years ago. The last time that we edited this, but we certainly could put in the document now. Yeah.
So actually, I think that's a great one. Great one to start with. I don't know if Michael remembers, but we had a conversation with David Eads a year or two ago. And so David cares a great deal about anything that gets compiled into the Kubernetes API server and wants to own it. So there is one very small piece of the Kubernetes API server, which is actually nicely separated from the rest of the code base, which is the client library that gets compiled into the Kubernetes API server. And so I think just as a note, the last time I talked to him, David Eads cares about that greatly. He doesn't really want to maintain it. He just wants to claim ownership in that if we go making huge changes, he wants to be able to tell us no.
I mean, that makes sense. I could totally grok it.
Yeah, I can grok it as well. I just figure it's worth calling out that we may want to do something where we say the client library is owned technically or not by the even if we're maintaining it by the API machinery team, whereas the network proxy server and agent are both owned by us.
Do you feel like owners files would be a good way to delineate and communicate that so that people will not accidentally make changes to code bases that, without the right people being notified? Or how are you
I
thinking
think
of
it's
that?
fine. I mean, technically, I'm the one who's on all of those owner files and maintain them, so
Mhm.
it's basically there already.
Do we need to put, David Eads into that owners file for that particular section so he sees those things?
It wouldn't hurt.
Because I'm all for being more inclusive of making sure that the stakeholders who are worried about something,
Yeah,
moving under their feet, like having the option to know about it. That sounds great.
yeah, I think that's fair. The other thing I would say, and we've discussed this before, but I think this seems like a great time to bring it up again. And I would really like to push for it. And I think El Miko and Noel have mentioned it. We technically own all of the cloud provider -X repos. I mean, they're actually our repos, but I think that we should start slowly but steadily rolling out some standardization across those to make our lives easier when it comes to things like testing. I think it might also be nice to do some standardization for OSS developers and even OSS users in terms of things like some of the layout so that they can understand things like, a normal way to bring up a cluster, which we need anyway for our own testing purposes.
I'm making the puzzled face because when you say
Yep.
normal way to bring up a cluster, that of course brings up many questions about normal for like, in situ testing or normal for vetted for production usability or normal in terms of able to be consistent across all providers. I think all of these are valid, but how would you like to define that in this case?
So you scare me the instant you use the P word.
I know. Sorry.
I'm not necessarily, and maybe we should have something in our README that
Yeah.
suggests, or maybe we should actually think about that a little more. But my general feeling is, I'm going to throw my own cloud provider under the bus. Cloud provider GCP. I mean, one, it uses Bazel, although I've got some PRs from some of my folks to move that to Make. So, which will make Elmiko and Null very happy. But so it's standard to me. It is standardizing mechanisms, right? But the other one one, we have Bazel, which is terrible. Two, we have KubeUp, which is terrible. For anyone who's been on the Kubernetes long enough, they probably have horrific memories of kubeup.sh, and we are the only ones left still using it. And I'm going to get rid of it. We have actually cloud provider GCP. There should be a README landing in a day or two, which describes how to do it with with COPS. And the final answer doesn't have to be COPS, but I do think that we want to get to the point where people know there may be other mechanisms, but I can always use tool X to get a cluster up and running. And what's more, the E2E testing tooling that we have, we'll use that and we'll actually run tests that way. And maybe what's more, we even say things like, look, it should be bringing up a multi-active control plane with HADR with like at least 3 instances of etcd, 3 instances of Kube API server, and various things like that, so that we know we're getting some fairly standardized behavior when we want to do testing. And I've been talking too long, and Elmiko has his hand up.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I like what you're saying. I think like what's occurring to me as we talk about this though, because I've tried to talk to a lot of different people about like what it would take to kind of like, I don't know, I don't want to say standardize, but like have more methodologies for bringing up clusters, right? Because we've talked about COPS here, we've talked about cluster API. We've talked about other methods too, like, Kube Spray and, kind of all sorts of different things, Gardener, different kinds of projects. I think like, given what we've learned about Kubernetes over the years and where we're at now, whatever design work we do to help with the testing on that level, I think we have to make sure that we create some sort of modular system, right? Where it's like, maybe we start with the idea that COPS is like our first, kind of target for this, but I think we have to design it in a way where it's flexible enough that like later on we could either, change it to something else, or maybe there'd be multiple ways of doing it or whatever, just because it just seems like that's the way the world's going pretty much.
Yeah, and it sounds like what I hear both you talking about is testing. And that might solve the thing I was worried about when I said the dreaded P word. And Walter was very reasonably saying, oh, please don't talk about production. And like, if we're scoping our recommendations here to testing, then we might say, like, this is the standard way to bring up a cluster for these tests. We are not making any guarantees about other places you might use these methods to bring up a cluster. And that way we're kind of constraining our recommendations such that we're not accidentally. What I always worry about is somebody sees, our recipes and say, this is how SIG Cloud Provider does it. Must be great. And then they go and they take that off into their lives, and maybe it works for their needs and maybe it doesn't. So yeah. So I think as long as we say what we're recommending is for testing, then that will be helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, we just have to have some sort of strong language that we put at the top of all of our like artifacts and everything, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I think there really is a lot of value there, and in fact, I think it is solving the problem that Elmiko and Bridget you both brought up repeatedly, which is that we have this hole that we've left with all of our cloud provider extraction, and we need a way to fill that hole. And I think that the various cloud provider repos and some standardization that our tooling can use to bring up clusters and then run tests is the best way I can think of, at least, to fill that hole.
Yeah, and I would also caution us to make sure we're using, in terms of images, like make sure we're using things that are bog standard stock upstream images. The trap that we want to avoid, I think, because I've been in this trap before, and I'm sure you folks have too, which is you have some images that are just for a purpose, and somebody grabs them and starts being like, these are now load bearing. And you're saying, "Oh, honey, no, please don't." And now we have to help you get off of those because you end up building an awful lot of castles on sand from somebody's test infra. Like we have to, if we're at least we're relying on the standard Kubernetes test infra, then for good or for ill, it will age in and out according to, the normal patterns. I don't want us to be on the hook for holding on to something ancient just so that we don't break provider X. It's like, well, because I'm so paranoid, I know, but that can happen. Okay, so in terms of when I put this on the agenda, what I was hoping for is definitely El Miko and Walter and anyone else who is, of course, interested, Joel, etc., go through, make some comments, edits. I think by the next time we meet in this meeting in a couple weeks, I should be ready to go put a PR in based on what language we've come up with in the doc. So comments are good. Edits are even better in terms of, like inline changes. Don't worry about editing that Google Doc, obviously, because the authoritative copy is out there on GitHub. And yeah, if we get a chance to jump in and if we think it's ready to PR it in at the next meeting, cool. If not, cool. But I do want to make sure, and I think that this probably dovetails really well with Miko's let's clean up the owner's files. Like if we get those owners files, nicely cleaned up, that will also, I think, be good timing with this. It's like owners files and what they control. Walt.
So one thing I wanted to throw in, I mean, I think you made an excellent point on images. When we start talking about running testing, I would actually recommend, I don't think it's the final answer, but I would recommend reading the doc that I threw in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
It was written by Kermit, like, I don't even want to look at how many years ago now. But it talks about actually trying, like we have many images and there are different combinations of images that we want to do for various tests. And the whole concept of last known good, I think Joe and I came up with it many years ago, but there's an entire doc that I think is good reading on how to manage. It's at least a good primer on how to manage the various combinations of images and trying to work it out.
Yeah. No, I like that. And I also think that the closer we can adhere to what's happening with, upstream patches, the better. If we're testing something that's very different than what the current set of patch releases are for upstream, somebody is going to be sad. We all work at, vendors and providers that we're constantly juggling but this exact matrix of sadness is the one that this customer is falling into. And you're like, oh, that shouldn't, yes, that can happen. So I think watching out for that is going to be a great idea. And this last known good is definitely a great way to go about it. So I'll read this in some detail as well. Thank you, Walter.
Yeah, +1. I'm a big fan of the LKG testing. It kind of reminds me of the old OpenStack days when we had these massive matrices of all the different versions being tested against each other. So yeah, I love it. I sincerely hope we can get to that point where we have this kind of like, okay, it's doing all these tests against all these different versions, and then we can really see where things are kind of coming apart. But like to step back up the stack one pop or whatever, like yeah, getting the owners files kind of adjusted will probably pave the road for us then to later be able to, just do much more in terms of implementing all the tests and like fixing things and stuff like that. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I think it'll take us, still some time to get there, but I think this SIG is not dissuaded by long efforts, if we look at our extraction migration, right? So
All right. Walter needs to peel off, and that's fine. Thank you. All right, that's what we had for topics. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to bring up that is not currently on the agenda? If not, we could definitely take a look at test grid before we say goodbye. And you are muted, Michael.
Yeah, well, I wasn't really saying anything, but yeah, it's looking fairly good, looking really good so far here. Yeah, I think we talked about this last time,
Mhm.
so that's like 2 weeks ago. But yeah, looking good. I think we're in good shape for this. The only testing thing that I know about right now is that I have a feeling Kirthan's already aware of this. There was some disruption happening with one of the I think one of the AWS AMIs was like out of date or something like that. Did you ever get a chance to look into that, Kirthan, or maybe did you talk with Dims about it at all?
Oh yeah, that was discussed on the Slack, right? I think I saw that on there.
I think so. Yeah, I think it had come up in Slack. There is an issue. I'm trying to remember, where did I see it before? These are all the cloud provider ones. I'll have to find it again. But we had been having an issue. It looked like there was an AWS AMI that was not resolving or something. Maybe it got fixed by now. Anyways, I can follow up, put it in the notes for next time.
Yeah, I just have to go back over to the Slack and look, which by the way, I think we did talk about a while ago on this call that there was some kerfuffle around Slack, and that is all resolved. Betty from Heroku is magic, and Salesforce has backed down from their previous statements, and Slack will remain, which is closure on that anecdote.
I didn't see an email, but did someone like step up and decide to pay for our account or something?
There is a VP at Heroku who is Betty Juno, who's a longstanding cloud native community member, who, when she saw what was happening, she went and had a nice conversation with her Salesforce compatriots and got them to see the value of leaving CNCF and Kubernetes Slack alone.
Oh, nice.
So,
Does Salesforce own Slack or something? Like, what's the Salesforce?
Salesforce owns Heroku,
Oh, okay.
and Slack.
Okay.
And those were acquisitions that they made over the last, ZERP era, whatever. So
Yeah.
now, of course, in the post-ZERP era, all companies are looking around at everything and figuring out what they want to keep supporting. And so there was that moment where it seemed like we would have to all figure out exactly what was going on with Discord, but now it is
Right.
fine.
I was waiting for my Discord integration to like pop up. Okay,
Oh
cool.
boy.
Crisis averted for the moment.
Crisis averted for the time being. Nothing is permanent, but at least currently, leadership at Salesforce has determined that they are leaving Kubernetes and CNCF Slack alone.
Cool. I mean, I'm a little sad because like I was starting to see all the memes people were throwing around about moving to Discord and kind of all the fun we were going to have on Discord. So I was getting a little bit hyped for Discord, but all right, that's cool.
I mean, there are plenty of communities that use Discord. I'm just happy because every time there's been a community move, there are always people who don't seem to make it to the next one. And so it's always good when you don't have to do a hasty, unnecessary move.
I mean, right, like we should know this, from our years of software development, right? There's always people who don't make the migration to the new version, right? And it's just like, what happened to them?
Yep. In any case, it looks like so test grid is good. We've got some follow-up that Elmiko and I are going to do here, and then we've tagged a few people about the SIG storage issue. And I believe we'll meet again in 2 weeks. Is there anything else people want to talk about today? All right. Well, thank you all, and we will see you next time.
Well, thanks, Bridget.
Bye.
Thank you.